Hey there, the topic for today's video is pass, continue and break statement in loops, for loop and while loop. How we can use pass, continue and break in these two types of loops. And here is the detailed agenda. We will start with the pass statement, then continue inside a for loop, then continue inside while loop, break inside for loop, break in a while loop, break in a nested for loop, and finally I give you an example of how you can avoid zero division error, which is when you are trying to divide a number by zero using continue and break. Starting with the pass statement. Pass statement is a placeholder, only a placeholder, expecting that certain code is going to replace it later. It means that you are planning something and you don't have the code right now, so you just write there pass. For example, if I write here for I in range 5 and I write here pass, now this program is going to do nothing. Here you see nothing is getting printed. If I come over here and write here print I, then now it is going to print me, if you see 0 1 2 3 4, and this pass is doing nothing. Most of the time pass statement is used while you are defining a function or a class as a placeholder, but it can also be used inside a for or a while. Next one is continue in a for loop. The continue statement skips the current iteration and moves on to the next iteration. For example, again if I write here for I in range 5 and write here print I, then it is going to print me 0 through 4 like this here. But what happens if I come over here and write if I is equal to 2, then continue. Now if I run this program this way, what will happen is that I am getting 0 1 3 and 4. First iteration I is 0. Now this if condition is being checked, is if I equal to 2, no, then it is going to print I, which is 0. Next iteration I becomes 1, still this if condition is not matched, so 1 is printed. Third iteration, now I becomes 2, now this if condition is satisfied, so it is going to skip it and it is not getting printed and it moves on to the next iteration. Next iteration I becomes 3, again this if condition is not matched, and finally I becomes 4 and then 4 is printed. So this is how continue works with a for loop. We can do the same with the continue in the while loop also. Let me define here I is equal to 0 and I say here while I is less than 5. Be aware with the while loop you need to increment the counter. If I is equal to 2, then continue, else print I. Now here you see, let us understand what is happening over here. I have initialized I with 0, so I is less than 5, then I am incrementing I by 1, so I becomes 1. This if condition is not matched because I is 1, so it will skip this part and then it will be printing me I equal to 1. You see it here. Next iteration I is still 1, so it is less than 5, but here it is getting increased by 1, so it becomes 2, and now this if condition is matched, therefore 2 is skipped, it is not printed over here. You can see 2 is not printed and it moves on to the next iteration. Next iteration 2 less than 5, fine. Now I is incremented by 1, so 2 becomes 3, I becomes 3. This condition is not matched and then it prints I 3 and so on so forth. The next is break statement, which is exact opposite of continue. Continue skips the current iteration and moves on to the next iteration, whereas break will break out of the loop, and if there is any elif or else part, it will skip that also. Let us see the example. For I in range I say 5, if I is equal to 2, then break, else print here I. Now if I run this program, what is happening here is that it is just printing me 0 and 1. First iteration I is 0, so this if condition is not matched, and then I is printed. Next iteration I becomes 1, still this is not matching, so it prints me 1. Next iteration I becomes 2, and it breaks out of this loop, and 2, 3 and 4 are not printed. And if there is any elif or else part, it will also break out of that. Let's rewrite the above program just to showcase it that it breaks out of the loop, skipping elif or else part also. For I in range 5, if I is equal to 2, then break, else print I. Now if I run this program, what will happen here is that here you see it is printing 0 and 1. Let's make it a bit more clear. I am going to use string. I is not 2, therefore printing, just to showcase you I. Now if I run this program, you can very clearly see that for the first two iteration, when I is 0 and 1, it is going into the else part, and as soon as I becomes 2, it breaks out of the entire loop, skipping also the else part. Similarly, we can use it also in a while loop. Again, I am going to define I is equal to 0, and while I is less than, let us say 5, if I is equal to 2, then break, otherwise print I, and do not forget to increment the I, otherwise in a while loop you will be stuck in a infinite loop. If I run this, again I am getting 0 and 1 here. Once I becomes 2, it is breaking out of the loop. What happens when you use a break statement inside a nested for loop? Let us see. For I in range, let's say I am going for 3, and let me define another loop for j in range, and this time I want to start it from 10 and go up to 15. If j is equal to let us say 12, then break, otherwise we are going to print here. I am going to again use I f string. I is equal to I, comma, j is equal to j. Now I am going to run this program. In this program, outer loop I is in the range of 3, so it will be having value 0, 1 and 2, whereas the inner loop j is having the value 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 and 15. But inside the inner loop I have given a condition: if j becomes 12, then you break. The question here is that whether it will break out of both the loops or the inner loop. The answer here is that it will break out of the inner loop and hand it over back to the outer loop. So initially I is 0, j is 12, I is still 0, j will move on to 11, which is here, you can see. Next iteration is I is still at 0. Remember, I will have the value 0, 1 and 2. J becomes 12 and it breaks out of this loop, inner loop j, and no 13, 14 and 15 are printed. You see it over here. I becomes 1, it goes back to the outer loop, and I becomes 1, and again then inner loop starts, kicks in. J is 10, fine, you can see in this line j is 10 and I is 1. I is still 1, j becomes 12, very fine. I is still 1, j becomes 12, it breaks out of the loop again. Finally I becomes 2, j is again 10, and in the next iteration I still remains 2 and j becomes 12, and then it loop breaks out of the loop. So the short and sweet answer is that break statement will break out of the inner loop, or the loop in which it has been used. Finally, let us see one real world example. You might have noticed that whenever you try to divide a number, let us say divide 10 by 0, you get the 0 division error. Here you see I am getting here 0 division error. We cannot divide by 0. We cannot divide by 0. So if you are writing a program where you want to prevent the user from dividing a number by 0, how do you do that? Let us see. And in the same program, I am going to use both continue and break. So I am going to write here while true, and I am going to define here two variables. One is called numerator and second one is denominator. So if I go back to my earlier example here, print 10 divided by 0. So 10 here is numerator and 0 is denominator. Remember this fact. So I am going to write here numerator. I am going to write in short num for numerator, input, enter, numerator. Similarly for denominator I am going to write in short den, int, input, enter, denominator. Now we are trying, what I am trying to do is that if denominator is 0, then we cannot divide. So I am going to write here if den is equal to 0, then I will say continue, else print. Again I am going to use the f string, num divided by den is equal to num divided by den, and then I am going to use the break so that we break out of this loop. Let's run this program. Numerator 10, denominator 2, we are getting 5. Okay, I should have written here like this. Let's run this program one more time. 10 divided by 2, so 10 divided by 2 we are getting 5.0. Very good. Now this time 10 divided by 0 I am going to do. Remember, we cannot divide by 0. So what is going to happen here is that again it is going to prompt me to enter the number. Again I said, let us say this time I say 4 divided by 0. It is still prompting me. Till the time I do not enter, it is continuing here because denominator is equal to 0, so it will keep prompting the user to enter these values. So let's get out of this loop. Let's say 10 divided by 2. Now we are out of this loop and I am getting the here 5. That is all for this video, fellow learners. If you find this video useful, do not forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends and subscribe to my channel. And I will upload all these codes onto my GitHub page and put the link into the description box. Till that time, happy coding.